Wonderful. Thank you. Some of you might have noticed that I have a microphone on, and that's because we are broadcasting this live, so it's easier to catch my voice if I use a microphone. And then the program says that this is a lecture, but it really isn't a lecture. I'm going to ask you some questions from your own country. So if you don't want to be recorded, please don't answer those questions and just avoid me. And whenever you are speaking, please hold the microphone so people who are following this online, they can hear us. Right, so that's just about it. We made preparations really carefully, and I sent the presentations in due time, which means that I sent it 15 minutes earlier. But it was an old version, and I had to send a new one, so it takes a minute or two to adjust ourselves. Meanwhile, I already introduced myself. My name is Tomi Kiilakoski. I work as a researcher here in Finland. And one thing you should probably know about Finnish youth system is that our connections between research and youth are, they happen on a daily basis. So we don't work in the ivory towers detached from youth work. So we are constantly doing things together. So hence, this is the reason why myself and Reetta and Jari and Gunnar are here representing the research community. So right, one thing more perhaps before we start. This is, I'm not going to speak about myself, this is about Finland. I work a lot in Europe, and to my knowledge, I am the only person in Europe who has a permanent position for studying youth work. I mean, as a hired researcher. There are some colleagues of mine work in the universities, but they do a lot of teaching. I don't. At the moment, I don't teach, so I just concentrate on researching youth work. So, right, that's it. Yeah, and we are ready to start. This is my, thank you. I just got this wonderful device. It makes these slides go, back and forward. Well, it's meant to do that. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you. You're really good with technology. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Like The Simpsons. Slides go on, slides go off. Those sort of things. Yeah. So this is my organization, Finnish Youth Research Network. It's not part of the universities. It's an NGO, like I said. And this is our logo. It's supposed to be, on top of a helicopter, there is this thing that, goes round. In Finland, they call it propelli. And we thought that we might have this international brand called Propel Productions until we realized that in English it isn't Propel, it's something else. Right. So let's start. The seminar is about youth participation and society. So I will be talking about youth participation and societies, looking at different European realities, and telling something about my own research and how myself I've been watching participation. And I always think that it's fair to tell you, where do I come from? What's my stance? At what position I am involved in these things. So I've been researching child and youth participation for, well, time flies, for 15 years, maybe even more. And at the same time, I've been involved in a lot of research projects. I've been involved in a lot of developmental projects. Perhaps the most important ones are working with youth workers to promote youth participation. When with Finnish UNICEF, we did the Finnish version of child-friendly cities, concentrating on children's rights. And I was also part of the group that created currently existing national core curriculum. And I specialized in writing the pieces about youth participation and then, editing them with my colleagues. So that's my viewpoint, mainly as a researcher, but also as a developer and as a person who's involved in a lot of networks on youth work. Right. So in Finland, we have talked about youth participation for 25 years. It's one of the most important topics. It also happens in different European countries, but in different pace. Some are slow, some are fast, some are concentrating on youth councils, some maybe concentrate more on NGOs and so on. But it's important to realize that this is happening at the same time all around the globe, especially in industrialized countries. And some of the researchers have actually said that we are currently experiencing a participatory turn, meaning that our ideas are changing on how we should govern people and how we should arrange services and so on. And those who are critical say that this participatory turn happens only in speeches, but it doesn't happen in reality. And some are more sympathetic, saying that there are still some problems. Young people do not have the power. They don't always have a say, but still people are trying and it's important. Then youth participation is important because in many of the countries we have been talking more about youth rights and children's rights, and the right to participate is one of the most important rights. So young people have a right to participate, they have a right to be heard, and it is our responsibility to make that happen. But that is not the whole story. Governance, then the rights. It's also about the way we think about services, the way we think about organizations. And also some of the people who are promoting participation, they have a background in business. And they say that it's important to engage your customers, and it's important to engage citizens because you are providing services to them, social work, education, youth work, library services, whatever it is. And this is an OECD report 20 years ago, which says that engaging citizens in policymaking is an advanced two-way relationship between government and citizens based on the principle of partnership. So we have been talking about partnerships for 20 years. We have been emphasizing this idea that it's important to have a two-way relation. It's not only about young people telling adults what they should do. It's not only about providing services, but it's about communicating and having a dialogue. And of course, we have to emphasize the active role of a young. And many of us who promote participation say that we have to come up with innovative, creative ways of promoting participation, not only in representative democracy, youth councils and students' councils and so forth. And the reason I wanted to start with this is that it's important to note that there are different sort of the background thinking and ideas behind promoting participation. Some of them have to do with children's rights, some of them have to do with creating more effective services, these business ideas, some have to do with organization and governance and so on, and some have to do with, with sort of a youth work ethos. But all of those things affect how we see participation. And in European countries, these ideas have different weight. Right. I live in the city of Oulu, which is 300 kilometers away from here. And every time I go to the airport, I see this sign advertising Oulu. It says the most intelligent city in the world. And as you can see, I'm not able to use even this simple technological device, which makes me wonder that if I live in the most intelligent city in the world, how screwed you are since you don't live in the most intelligent city in the world. Yeah. Right, moving on. Now this is getting embarrassing. Yeah. And the thing that makes it even worse, that it's actually broadcasted live. Ville, can you put it a little larger? I know that you can't see anything at the moment, but it's going to happen soon. So this is where I start asking questions from you. This is European Union does youth barometers, and some of the countries we come from is represented in this study, and countries like Armenia and Georgia unfortunately are not here, but you can tell about your own countries in due time. Saako suurennettua sitä? Joo. 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 Right, we are just experimenting how this happens. Well, I'll tell you what's really important about this. This is a study that asked young people in different parts of Europe, where did they participate in? Did you vote? Did you join a political organization? Did you join a protest? And little less than half young people in average said that they had voted. 42% of them said that they had participated in a youth political organization. And then 26% had engaged in a protest. And the thing that strikes me here that Lithuanian young people and Estonian young people and also Bulgarian young people are more likely to vote, they are more likely to protest, and they are more likely to be involved in organizations. And I don't know the reason for this, why Lithuania in particular is so high. I do have some ideas why Estonia is so high, and I don't know why Bulgaria is so high. And I know that some of us come from Lithuania and Bulgaria, so it's time to give you the room. But please use the microphone so people following us online can hear you. Yeah, so I'm giving you the microphone. Well, I don't really know much about Lithuania. I do know the situation in Estonia, so I wouldn't, like to make any guesses because probably you're in a better position to say why Lithuania sort of stands up here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not working.
Yeah.
It is working.
It is, yes.
I'm from Bulgaria, and we are notorious for our high corruption levels.
Yeah.
So distrust in the government is definitely a force that drives you to vote and to fight for social change and also to protest.
Yeah. What about political organizations for the young people? Why are the young people in Bulgaria more active than people in Sweden or Finland?
Because they're happy with their government, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing before we continue. Please say your name and where do you come from so people following us online can also make sense of what's going on here.
All right. I'm Ivana from Bulgaria. Yeah. And in addition to everything that was said before, I think the young people in Bulgaria are just genuinely getting tired of the situation because I can speak for my generation. And please, girls, correct me if I'm wrong, but we grew up with this idea that once we graduate from high school, we are already set to move abroad, to get proper education and to settle for a nice life in Western countries of Europe. And this is something that we start getting tired of because we don't want to feel embarrassed when we go abroad and people to look at us in a certain way because of the political situation that is there. And that's the reason, from my personal opinion, why we start going more and more on the streets, why we protest, why we vote so much, even though we had 5 or 6 elections in the last 2 years, if I'm not wrong, and we still don't have government at the moment. Yeah, a lot of people also join political organizations because we get tired of old people with old visions deciding for us. And we start to understand more and more that we're an engine and we have a power, we have a voice, and that it's not so complicated to use it and to be a change maker. And of course, there are other factors and other reasons sometimes to want to be in such a position, but I think genuinely we're just tired of not feeling good in our own country. And we start doing stuff about it.
Yeah. What about Lithuanian perspectives? Do you want to say something? Yep, I'll give you the microphone. Thank you.
So, Christina from Lithuania. Well, we're quite surprised about the protest because I think that we do not have such a culture of protest. We are silent protest, but I wouldn't say that a massive protest. So it depends. How do we call it? So that was the one. And talking about the young politician parties or NGOs, they are quite popular in Lithuania, but I believe that the elder generation of the political parties are trying to grow up the new generation, so they are trying to engage them through, as it's not so popular to join straight to the political party, so you start just playing, they're organizing some summer camps, and young people are mainly starting to join because it's fun. You can have good connections, maybe it will help later for your career. And some of them later joined the parties, political parties, but that's not the massive one. So it depends. Probably just they join because of the fun. And later they find out the good points of that.
I find that it's fascinating that you said that, young people in Bulgaria participate because adults have not done enough, and they have, sort of failed young people in a lot of ways. So you have active participations because adults haven't promoted participation, whereas for you, the narrative was different. It was about creating conditions for participating and making it fun and accessible and so on.
Well, it's
Yeah.
my own
Yeah.
opinion. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
Lithuania, but
Oh, yeah. But I think it's important to spell out these different ideas because whenever we are talking about youth participation, there are certain social goals we are trying to exceed, and that's why we choose our methods in a certain way. And it's really important to realize that actually we come from different corners and we are trying to do different things. And surrounding society affects how they can promote participation. And for that reason, what works in Finland may not work in Lithuania, may not work in Bulgaria, and vice versa. So that's important to spell out. But you wanted to continue?
I'm Greta from Lithuania. I was thinking about the protests, and I think the main thing is the topic of a protest, what people are fighting for. Of course, there are some changes in our law system, let's say about labor laws or something like that. But despite people complaining, we wouldn't see many people on the streets fighting for that. But when it comes to national security and national identity, people get like real crazy and get on the streets and protest at the parliament and so to show some support to some neighboring countries, and so it's also a matter of a question. And if we would see what happens in France, for example, when we change the laws of retirement or so, in Lithuania it wouldn't happen. But when we have different angles, different topics that trigger us, that also might be shown here. And also maybe in Lithuania we talk a lot about youth participation, and it might be a reason why youth reflect their participation as well. Because in some countries it might be like, yeah, I go to vote, but it's like a daily procedure for me. But in some countries it might be, emphasized.
Yeah, fascinating. I need to ask you one more thing about Lithuania. This column here is about boycotting certain stuff. And 55% of the Lithuanian young people say that they have boycotted, which is far more than anywhere else. So what's the reason for, boycotts being so high? Because usually you have those countries that, concentrate on representative democracy, like voting and youth political organizations. But boycotting is really high in Lithuania. So is there sort of a campaign reason, or are you able to sort of explain that? Yeah, this is, just asking, have you boycotted something? But if you compare this to, I know that you can't see anything, but, Spanish young people, they vote more than young people in Europe in average. But they are perhaps a bit more active in political organizations, but they boycott less than, than European average, which means that perhaps in Spain, the participation of young people, it's about engaging in politics. Whereas in Finland, the situation is vice versa. Finns are not so active in political sphere, but they engage a lot in boycotting. Same thing in Sweden. Somebody was from Spain. Do you want to say something about Spain? I don't want to, I studied in Spain, but it was 25 years ago, so perhaps my information is not too up to date. My best friends were anarchists. They had wonderful parties.
Right. Well, I mean, like when it comes to boycotting, yeah, for sure it's not popular in Spain at all. And what you said about being active in political parties and so, my feeling is that if you already have a political option, whereas it's extreme right or extreme left, but like most of the people in the middle, they are not so active actually. It's like they are there, but they are not. It's difficult to ask them to do something, to become part of a political party or a movement or an NGO or whatever.
Yeah. And my Finnish colleagues, be aware, I'm going to ask you about why I think young people in Finland do not engage in political representative democracy but are active in boycotting. But please, go on.
Yeah, I can
Say your name before you
Uh,
start.
I'm George, originally from
Yeah.
Greece, but I live
Yeah.
in Spain the last 2
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
in Andalusia. So I can
Yeah.
confirm what my colleague said. Like young people, like in Andalusia, are very inactive. They are very passive, and it's very hard for us, like in our youth work, in our everyday youth work, to engage them in the activities, in like youth participation, in the politics. Like it's very hard, and we have like to explain very much why it's important, why you have to do this. It will be like very impactful for your life, for your personal development, and yeah, and mostly like the recent elections in Andalusia, like they had for the first time in the 40 years after the dictatorship, like the right party was like with the majority voted for the first time in Andalusia, and as I was asking some people like why you voted this, like most of the young people told me like because of our family they said that like to vote this part, like they don't have like their own ideas, like they believe what the family say and do. So yeah, it's kind of obvious, and of course boycotting, it's not a case in Spain. They don't do these things.
Do you still see the effects of a civil war from the 1930s in Spain? Does it affect how politics is seen?
For sure,
Yeah.
they have a lot of effects from the dictatorship and from Franco. Like they still remember Franco and they are affected by this. But I think also in Andalusia I can speak because they have like this micronationalism, as we say, like because they're divided in communities in Spain. They believe that their community is the best from the other communities inside Spain. So they have like this kind of discrimination inside their own country. And I think in general it affects their way of thinking, and they cannot have like this national perspective and later European perspective. They are also not even able to participate in Erasmus projects. They don't see like why this would be a benefit for them. It's also even for this, like you say you will have like everything covered like by the European Commission, and they don't want to do it. They don't want to do the step to get out of their region, not even out of from their country. It's very hard.
Do you want to say something? You seem to disagree a bit.
Especially
Yeah.
when it comes to the civil war and so, I completely disagree. I think like if you ask most of the young people there, they don't know anything about that. Most of them, they don't even know who Franco was.
Yeah.
Was our ruler for like 40 years. No, there. I mean, like if you ask a 16-year-old there, they don't know. I mean, many of them, they don't know who he was. And they don't know about the civil war, most of them. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Not the facts, but who was Franco, everyone knows, but everyone in Europe, not only in Spain.
well, I mean, I'm working in a high school now, and like, if you ask like basic history about Spain, like recent history, many of them they don't know. I mean, like they don't know, and they don't know and they don't care. It's like it's been like forever, like because I mean, if they are 15, they
It's different, like don't care about something that they don't know. Of course, because they haven't experienced it, they don't have an opinion how is dictatorship.
But if they know like Franco and they don't know what he did and what his cause were and his kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
that's why we have extreme right party high in Spain, because they haven't experienced that. But they know the experience what is, yeah. Of course. That's why they have micronationalism, because they believe in themselves like they can do things better than others.
I feel like nationalism comes from another part. I mean, like, yeah, we do have religions in Spain, we do have like our own history, and I think like when it comes to nationalism and so, it's more related with our own history, like regional history, than with thinking that we are better than others. That was my
Yeah. Some of us who were watching us online didn't hear what you were saying, so I just repeat what was going on. There was a bit of disagreement if the period of Franco still has effect, and if young people know and care about Franco's history as a dictator of Spain. Can't remember the Spanish word anymore. Sorry, I studied in Salamanca 25 years ago. So yeah. So, but I think that this discussion was quite fruitful, because it showed that not even professionals working with young people necessarily agree on the background of participation. So things might be different in, based on countries, within regions, and so on. So that's important to note as well. Can you pass on the microphone to my Finnish colleagues? And if some of you have ideas why, young Finns are not so interested in voting compared to their European friends, but they are more active in boycotting. Same thing in Sweden. Yeah.
Ready for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My name is Hanna Liikanen, and I'm from here, Viiskala, and working with social youth.
Yeah.
So, nuorta coordinator. Why Finnish youngsters? They are, but their own way, not the political way what we have. But I think they are active in internet. We have also this right and left side who are interested about taking care of nature. They are active. They like a radical right side are also active in internet. So they are their own way, but not voting, not in our system. But I don't know why. Maybe I have not, more because you have made research so many years, and this question comes so quickly to me. But I think they don't feel that change anything to vote something. Because there are old people in the government and they are parties. I think many of the parties, because parties have to do compromising when they do, and nothing, they don't see it something is changing anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you?
Yeah, well, I agree, yes. But first I have to say that, I used to teach at Humak University of Applied Sciences. In Finland, we have a dual model for higher education. We have academic universities, and then we have more practice-oriented universities, polytechnical universities, which we call universities of applied sciences. And I taught youth work there for quite some time ago. And asking questions from you brought me back, so I'm sort of struck by nostalgia at the moment and experiencing this cyclical, way of life. Things keep repeating themselves and so on. Yeah, well, the way I would approach it is that for some reason, it's about demographics of Finland as well. The older generations in Finland, baby boomers in Finland, there are 100,000 of them born every year. And last year they had 45,000 children born in Finland. So the elderly generations there are much more of them, and they are active in voting. And our political system, I think, that isn't too good at, approaching young people and tackling questions that are important for young people. And the parties don't really care. Then they have to fight for voters. They talk about pensioners. They talk about elderly healthcare, which are really important topics. But they don't really appeal to young people the same way digitalization or environmental issues or mental health being of a young would. So that's one of the reasons.
I think the last active young generation was the 70s.
Yeah.
And after that, we don't really have any really active young generation.
Yeah, as a whole, yes.
And all those
Yeah.
who have been then, they are now
Yeah.
in charge.
Yeah.
They are now old cops.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think one also reason is problems. Like in Finland, we have quite things quite good, like a social system and
Yeah.
school system. And these problems like global warming, they are so big and difficult things to really affect in political system. So maybe the young people, they want to change these things, but they also feel that it's so difficult and monitatsyyinen tämmöinen.
Yeah.
Many things,
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
many things in
Multifaceted. Yeah.
The problems
Yeah.
are so
Yeah. Yeah.
difficult, so it's
Yeah.
also quite difficult to affect in our political system.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I would like to
Yeah.
give this to somebody else.
I pointed out certain countries because they sort of stand out here, and they may help us in realizing European differences. Do you want to talk about situation in your own country? even though your country wasn't mentioned. You're free to do so, and in a while I will move forward. Yeah. Let's go to Greece. I will give you this microphone, and then I will get that one back. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Zenonas. I'm from Greece, and I study at the university. I'm in my second year.
Yeah.
And usually, every Greek person who finishes high school, I think all of them hear about the political situation inside of the universities, because we have a lot of political parties inside the university formed by young people. So definitely, when I first got into the university in my first year, not only in my universities, but I visited other universities around my city, and it was insane on how much the political participation in young people is there. For example, when you go inside the university, you see a lot of stands of political parties formed by young people. They approach you. They want to explain the reasons to you. They make to make you change your mind in a lot of things. They don't have always the best approach of communicating with you. So I think definitely the approach or some sort of manipulation is happening from behind. I don't know, but I'd say that the situation inside the university, because mostly young people, is not the best one. I think it's getting to a point where it's annoying to see all these people being so fanatic about politics. And for example, if you see a Greek university inside, you will see a lot of how do you say? Yeah, posters. Yeah. You will see a lot of yeah, it's yeah. You will see graffiti. They really have the need to express themselves through these political parties, and I think some reasons for that, aside from the history, as we mentioned before, from Spain, I think it's some current events like globalization, for example, or social media. I think they affect the youth like unconsciously, and maybe they do not understand, and they want to express themselves by being in political parties, like fighting the system, creating maybe new things, having their voice heard. So it's a multi reasons for that.
Yeah, just take the microphone. Yeah.
Do you think it's the majority or the minority, these people in the universities? Because I believe it's like specific people that belong in the parties. I was in the Greek university for 7 years, and I saw this because I also was in a political party. But the main people who were in these parties, like, were few. Like from the 200 people that were coming every year in the university, only the 20, 30 were getting involved. The others were inactive. They didn't want to get involved.
So obviously, yeah, what you're saying in some sense is true. But when we're talking about, for example, comparatively to other countries and other friends that I've spoken to from other countries in the world, I think Greece the situation is so much different than other countries. For example, in Finland or even UK, France. Like, if you visit a Greek university, I had a Spanish friend who came to Greece, and when he saw, like, for example, a socialist party, communist party, I don't know however you want to say it, he had a conversation with them, and he was really surprised by the things and their mindset. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of Greek young people are indifferent about politics because they have this mindset and this idea that everything that's involved with politics in Greece is corrupt. And I think a reason for young people to not be involved in politics, and as you say, they don't want to express themselves, is because they have this idea, let's say, this mindset, this idea that's stuck to their minds, that whatever is involved with politics in Greece is corrupt, so I don't care about that. I think that's wrong. Like, politics is truly super important for us. We need to be involved in it, but with a clear mind, without bias and ideas from other people that influence us.
What about young people in Greece who are passive in party politics? They don't want to get involved in that. Are they active in other spheres of life?
Okay, so basically, because I consider myself to be an active person, I have done a lot of things, volunteering and business in terms. So when I ask,
having known you for a couple of seconds, it's really easy for me to believe that you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, I guess. And I also, not try, but I am also an extrovert. That being said, I have spoken with a lot of people, a lot of young people specifically, in my university and not. And from what I have understood is that they do not care. Like, they do not want to do other things, to go out of their comfort zone, to improve, to see the world, to understand themselves. I think it's a cultural thing. I truly believe that. I think some roots, maybe from their parents or the culture of the history, are holding us back to not discover new things about ourselves and really take the next step of our lives. Now, the reason for that, for this cultural thing, I think is maybe it starts from family, definitely from school. We don't pay attention to our education system as much. We are more of a traditional a nation, but I think that's starting to change from time to time. So I think that's a good thing, and maybe Greece, hopefully in the future, will have a different mindset.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to continue? Yeah, just take them. Yeah. Which year? This Eurobarometer was done in 2022. It was published in spring, I think in May. So it's around half a year old. But then again, of course, every time as researchers we publish something, our data has been gathered, a little behind that. So this material, I guess, is around, 1 year old. But this is from COVID times. So
Excuse me, I'd like to add something else. Now it's just got to my mind.
Yeah.
Another reason that young people are not so involved, I'd say it's the lack of information. For example, the Erasmus Plus project. In my university, because I also have an informal group of Erasmus young people, when I ask people about Erasmus, the first thing that got to their mind is only the 6-month studies. They have no idea about these short-term mobilities, which are super helpful, and you can do as many as you want. And it's not only about Erasmus, it's about other volunteers. For example, I want to name, some organization like Isaac or other NGOs, like they have no idea. The lack of information from this organization towards young people, it's low, it's relatively low. So young people maybe do not have the knowledge of expanding their horizons. So maybe that's the reason.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this is the newest information they have comparing, different European countries. So there are, my Australian colleagues talk about take-home messages, when you go back home and you meet your family members or your friends, and they ask what was that guy who had a funny hair? What was he talking about? And if you're able to answer one sentence, it's the take-home message. So what I wanted to emphasize here is that young people participate in a lot of different ways, and in different European countries it's different. For us in Finland, young people are heavier on boycotting compared to their European counterparts than actually voting, and same thing in Sweden. So most of the time when they are talking about how active young people are, they are usually looking at voting percentages, not necessarily how much they boycott and so on. And also, I've talked to Finnish youth workers a lot, so we don't overemphasize voting, but they could be more wide in looking at the ways young people actually participate. And of course, we know that those young people who are active, they tend to be active in a lot of days. And it happens in other forms of life as well. If you're interested in cultures, for example, if you watch a lot of movies, TV series, you follow bloggers and so on, so it's probable that you are interested in other forms of arts as well. And if you exercise sports, like if you like jogging and playing football, it's likely that you have other sports as well. Whereas those young people who aren't active in sports, they don't necessarily do anything physical. And young people who are politically active or who participate a lot, usually they have a lot of tools they can use. They are active in many ways. So at least in Finland, they can't find young people who wouldn't be interested in voting, for example, or wouldn't be interested about party politics. Those who are active in boycotting or joining organizations or being active in the social media usually are interested in party politics as well. So first point, it's about different forms of participating. And second one, I think this is important from the European scale, that we know that for example in Finland, young people are it might be easier to to work with them in doing boycotting or social media stuff, whereas in some other countries, young people are more active in representative democracy, and like Lithuanians who are active in surprisingly many ways. And of course, I ask you about motivations, why young people behave differently in Lithuania and Bulgaria and Greece and Spain and Finland. And they heard a lot of different stories, what motivates young people. Their dissatisfaction with society, perhaps a feeling that elderly generations have failed them. Sort of the social or eco-social disappointment. In Finland, eco-social disappointment is an important factor for getting active in politics, because you feel that elderly generations have destroyed nature and you have to do something, and we only have so little time. Or it might be about political parties making it fun. Or it might be about social situations going around. It might be about peer group stuff going on in the universities. It might be about, expressing yourself through consumerism and so on. So also motivations of young people differ. And I think the really, really important question and really, really difficult question is that whenever they are doing youth work and they are promoting youth participation, what should you do in Finland? If young people are more likely to boycott, would you support them in boycotting? Or do you try to make them interested in party politics? And you could say that, okay, it's good youth work that you help young people to, to find new ways of expressing themselves and making an impact in a society. So there's a youth work reason for doing that. But then again, you could give a youth work reason for saying that since young people are active in, in their consumer affairs, so work on that. Young people are interested in that, and youth work should be about interest in young people. So build your projects on that. And that's a really, really, really tricky question, since in our societies, young people participate in different ways. What should you encourage? And should you do something in those spheres of participation that young people are more inactive in your countries? And I know that you cannot see any of these numbers. The bluer this is, the higher this ratio is. So like Lithuania was here, so there's a lot of blue in Lithuania and so on. You will get the slides, right, Ville? So if you want to take a look, and it also includes a link to the publication, so you can go directly to that and look at the 100 pages that's there. Right, I will continue to another topic, but 2 points to say. Can you give the microphone to him, and I will give microphone to you.
It's not a question, but
here you are.
I think that it's not Lithuania, it's Luxembourg with the...
Luxembourg. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Which is, yeah. Oh, yeah. So what's Lithuania? Yeah. Yeah, just forget about the whole thing, and, you can go... Yeah.
It sounds strange to me for Lithuania to be so active on the experiences I have, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for screwing up. Yeah, I look at the wrong column. Yeah. Yeah. But you gave a perfect explanation anyway. Yeah. Yeah. I screwed up with the columns. Yeah. But anyway, it goes to show that then whenever we are talking about our society, we are able to, to tell different stories and provide plausible stuff. Yeah. This was just broadcasted live. So I'm an associate professor in the University of Tampere. I do work a lot in Europe, and this goes to show how ignorant I am. But please continue. Yeah. And then to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this was just a remark. Okay, wonderful. I'm really glad about that. I'm happy to be corrected. Yeah.
I do have a question about the situation here in Finland, because as far as I know, approximately 40% of the people in the government are women, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
Most of them are very young. Plus, the Prime Minister, I believe, is the youngest Prime Minister in Europe. Isn't that wrong? And she's
Well,
also
yeah.
right?
At least one of the youngest. I wouldn't know she was at certain point. Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
36, 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
when you consider those facts, the fact
Mm.
that such a big percentage of the people in leading roles of the country are so young, how do you explain the fact that such a percentage of youngsters actually are like not interested and not involved and are not just like politically active?
Yeah, well, convincing, mixing Lithuania and Luxembourg, I'm really sorry about that. That was something that sort of undermined my credibility. But I think I have a fairly good answer to this, although I don't blame you if you don't, if you give me a bit of a discredit, because what I just did, when we were forming the government, the guy who was leading Social Democrats was an elderly man, and he had been in the elections, but he screwed up, so he was forced to go, and then they chose Sanna Marin, who was, she wasn't our first female prime minister, so we have had female prime ministers before. But the thing is that the two of them, Mari Kiviniemi and Anneli Jäätteenmäki, they were only prime ministers for quite short period of time. So originally, then the government was formed. It wasn't full of youngish women. They are, all of them are over 30, but compared to, if you look at pictures of what's going on in the European Union, and then the heads of a state meet, it's usually white, elderly male shaking their hands, and Sanna Marin in her leather jacket sort of stands out. So it's it tells about gender equity in Finnish society, and the next prime minister most probably won't be a female, if the gallops are right. So the situation might change, and also Sanna Marin and those other ministers who are also leaders of their political parties. They are rather young, considering the politics. They are really active in social media as well, such as Instagram and so forth. But the thing about Sanna Marin, that our prime minister, that probably isn't visible to Europe, is the fact that Social Democratic Party, her party, is the eldest party in Finland. So the average age of Social Democrats, this one I know, I mean Lithuania, Luxembourg, those ones I don't get. I don't know Finnish situation, I know quite well. So the average age is 67 or 68. So the average age, which means that a lot of them are really, really old, because there are also young people involved. And a lot of the politics Social Democrats are doing is targeted for elderly generations, because that's their voters, their constituency comes from. So that doesn't necessarily attract young people. So even though you're big on Instagram and you have a lot of followers, doesn't necessarily mean that your politics is connected to young people. But to a certain young activists, that's wonderful, and that's really important. Then they're growing up in Finland 25 years ago, then they're children. Then they looked at government, it was full of elderly male. And now the whole image of power and politics has changed. It's about women. So it may have a stronger impact on Finnish society. But still, if you look at content of the politics, it isn't really targeted to young people. It's still targeted to elderly age groups. There are still 100 of those elderly age groups per year who are really active in politics. So that's, unfortunately, there the power lies. And it's not about, in my opinion, it's not about. Some people think that if you use TikTok or if you use Instagram or those other social media applications, you immediately attract young people. But of course, that isn't the case. You have to talk about topics that are important for young people in a language that they can understand, and then maybe you can encourage more young people to join politics. Yeah. So, it certainly looks like a paradox. You have a government full of, young women, and it certainly seems progressive, and it is, of course, it is, compared to the way things used to be in Finland. But still, it's not enough. It has to be about the content, and it has to be about the politics, and it has to be about the feeling that you can actually make an impact in Finland. And I'm, as a researcher, I really don't want to, I have political ideas, but I don't want to express them in this social role. But what can be clearly said is that our government, if you look at, what interests young people, we are trying to renew our law of transgender young people and children. We are trying to change our law on the rights of our indigenous people, Sami people. Most of them living in the Helsinki region, but those ones who live in the traditional lifestyle, they do live in Lapland. So transgender young people, indigenous people, our Environmental Protection Act, and now I'm forgetting something, Disability Act, yes. And all of those four really important sort of identity political laws, we don't know if they can actually pass them because, we are soon heading towards new elections. So the way they did politics was to concentrate on different matters and lead those, laws that, in my opinion, are really important. So it's not certain if they can actually pass them. And if they don't pass them, we still have to wait for 4 years for us to, protect the rights of transgender children in Finland. So it's really, really complicated. We'll take one more, and then I have to, go on. But please do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe what I'm about to say is kind of controversial, but
Yeah.
I'd like to stay on the topic of the transgender. And you're saying that you would like to pass laws about protecting transgender children. So I would say, with nothing between me, like it's a genuine question, okay? Like, why would you want to create transgender children in the first place? For example, for an individual to make such a huge life decision about something that is extremely vital about their self, okay? Why would you want to encourage this act even if the child themselves, it's a child, okay? He doesn't know a lot of things. He hasn't developed the critical ability to criticize and to think and to express his or her opinion on a lot of things. So why would you think it's a good idea for a child to say, okay, like, I don't want to be this gender, I want to be the other gender? Like, how do you base that? If the child like goes to their father and asks, I don't feel like a girl, I feel like a boy, like, what does this mean? Because if he likes to play with girl toys or like boy toys, for me, it's something dangerous to try to go ahead with this initiative. I think everyone should be able to do whatever they want, with no criticism whatsoever. But I think we need to reach to a point where we have developed a sense of critical ability in order to proceed with a huge life decision. Because as you already know, the researchers indicate that being a transgender person it's so not hurtful, but it's super demanding on your body and on your psyche. So it's a really important decision, and I do not think that a child has the ability, let's say, to proceed.
Yeah, there's a social debate on that. I don't want to open up a debate because I still want to talk about youth participation, but I'll just give a short. Yeah, I will just give a short answer, and I'm not trying to, put you down or anything. The short answer would be that it's respecting the rights of a child, and many people would say that it's not about creating transgender young people. There are those young people, and you give them right to express themselves, and you give them, political rights which belong to every citizen or every person living in Finland. And of course, it's a different thing if you change your social gender, saying that, I feel like a woman, and then you're entitled to, to go to a certain bathroom and so on. It's a different thing doing medical operations, and those two things are often mixed. So we are talking about that, social side of it. But let's continue this. I'm happy to debate. I'm always open for that. But let's continue this after this lecture, because this is such a hot topic and people feel really strongly about that. But I'm a bit cautious that they need to maybe push forward. Yeah. But thanks, it's, I sincerely believe in conversation, that we need to be open, and then they can discuss, with respect, and then they will. Silencing other people is never a good solution, even though I'm tempted to disagree with a lot of racist opinions in Finland, for example, but they still have a right to express those. Yeah, do you want to add something? Be really short, so I can.
Very short.
Yeah.
And
There's still
also,
some points I want to tackle.
I believe that also since there is a lot of lack of acceptance of these people in our society, a lot of politics that have these, let's say, values in their parties, they try to attract people in order to get more votes. So in a way, they're not like, we will protect your rights, blah, blah, blah. They're just doing it because not the other party, the right party for sure will not do that. So they try to do this in order to attract more votes. So you see in the end that youth, again, are not active and they don't want to participate in the politics because they don't feel represented by them. When you're not accepted by the society, how you will be able to belong in a political party that doesn't represent your values and the general values that should be everywhere, let's say, funded and accepted by everyone.
Yeah. We do an annual...
Why we say it's hard to be a trans and we don't say why it's hard you as a human to accept the trans people? This would be the question, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, in Finland we do an annual youth barometer that is done by our organization, and they interview 2,000 young people every year on different topics. And 7 years ago we started, before they asked, are you a male, a female, I don't want to say. And they added some alternatives so you can, express your identity. But there are not that many young people actually responding. Last year we had 12, which is the highest number ever, which means that statistically speaking, it's a small group. But then symbolically protecting human rights of everyone, that's a priority. And no matter how the small group is, we still, have to create, a respectful society, whatever that means for a lot of people. Yeah. So moving forward, hopefully, yeah. Professionally, I have had better moments in my life than this particular lecture. Yeah. Oh my, yeah, wrong button. Yeah. So why do we need youth participation? I mean, I wanted to show, still embarrassed about Luxembourg, Lithuania, Yeah. Yeah, but
At least first time,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're in a different league now. So, yeah. Not with the Baltic countries. Yeah. But perhaps it proves the point that it's really important to learn about different European realities, because we might have a wrong impression. All right. Why do we need youth participation? I mean, I don't have to justify it to you. I just, listed some of the arguments for promoting youth participation. Firstly, the developmental perspective. If you want citizens to be active, you don't become active like this. You have to be taught how to be active. You have to be, you have to grow up to be active. So then you help young people to make an influence. They can, exercise those skills later on in their life. And it's also about discussing together and so on. And learning how complicated things are. And then there's the service perspective. I work a lot with the Finnish municipalities, and at that role we are looking at services of young people from the service side. And the argument is that if you know what young people really want, we can offer better services to them because we understand their situation. So it makes sense economically as well. And then it's about democracy. I mean, Finland is quite well-working society. There was an international comparison published, I think yesterday, which showed that Finland is the second least corrupted country in the whole world. And they are doing quite well in a lot of studies as well. But young people don't necessarily want to take part in Finnish politics, which might mean that their voices are not presented. So if we get more young people to be active and raise their voice, we can make our democracy better. So it's not about young people, it's about all of us, basically. And then I already talked about human rights perspective, really important for me, and sort of the importance of that has gotten bigger in the last years. So young people and children have a right to participate in every society, no matter how corrupt it is, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how few people in your society actually hold the power. Still, young people have a right to participate, and it's a powerful argument. But it's easier to make in Finland than it might be in. I was lecturing in Georgia 3.5 years ago, and I met ministry guys and talked about children's rights. And I got the impression that they weren't too happy about, children's rights. But it's still a powerful argument. There's something that's powerful. And at least in Finland, if you use these rights-based arguments, they might be more effective than talking about democracy or development and perspective. And it's also about it's also about local community to make it stronger. And I've been involved in promoting participation for 15 years, and I always feel that it's important to emphasize that this is nothing new to you probably. But then the promoting youth participation, it's not about young people, it's about all of us. Because if we can help young people to be active in society, then the society is better for all of us. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to tell a bit about how I've studied participation myself. You get as many definitions of participation as many people you ask, because different people frame it differently. Me and my colleagues Anu Kretzel and Elina Nivala, we sort of came up with this idea that then they are trying to understand participation. It needs to have 3 components. Firstly, in whatever young people are active in whatever form they are trying to participate. It might be school, it might be city urban planning, it might be how to decorate a youth club. Young people have to be given a role where they can participate. And the role has to be stated that you have a right to participate. If you don't have that role, or if you're lied, there can't be participation. So there's a lot of research stuff there, but that's really important. They have to have a role, and it has to be formally and informally accepted. Like in a lot of schools, official school rule says that you can participate, and you have a right to do so. But then you say that I'm going to a student council meeting, and I can't attend your mathematics lessons, and then teachers are becoming a bit restless and say that I know that it's really important to participate, but this mathematics lecture is really easy, so you should really join this lecture. So informally, they are not given the role. And of course, in some cases, sort of the development projects stop here. You give young people a role, and that's it. But of course, that's not participation. If young people don't act, if something isn't happening that's meaningful to young people, then it's not participation. So the second thing has to be that there is an action. So participation cannot be training for the future. It has to do something here and now. So it's about the present. It's not about the future. So children and young people should be active themselves. And if we are talking with adults, we can fairly reliably talk about first one, if we give children and young people a proper role. But the second one, we have to start asking young people. And the third one, of course, it's not enough that young people actually do something. It has to feel meaningful to them. So for me, participation is also about feeling of participation, feeling that you actually made an impact. And in some cases, they fail to make that feeling happen because, it was just a thing they did. And they can report afterwards that they ask young people their opinions, and based on their opinions, we changed this and this. But if young people themselves don't feel that they participated, then it's not really participation. So that's our idea. And the main thing about the third party is that whenever we are trying to evaluate participation, for example, in Finnish municipalities or schools or youth centers, this means that every once in a while you have to ask young people, did they feel that they participated? No matter how wonderful, things are. And usually then they are studying school bullying, or they are studying violence, or they are studying participation. Adults, in many of the cases, they have more positive opinion on what's actually going on than the young people. So right, that's how I see participation. And then they are promoting participation. It's important that there is, there's an official role, there's action, and there's feeling of involvement. So, and one thing more that I don't know if this is so applicable in Europe, but this is really important for us in Finland, especially in youth work. For us, it's quite vital, really important to separate between what can be called and what I call political participation, which means that you can make changes in your surroundings, you can make an impact, something happens, you influence the community, and you take part in decision making and take responsibility. So when we are talking about voting and joining political parties, it's usually about that. But then there's another element about participation as well, which might be termed social participation, which is about feeling of community, feeling of involvement, feeling of engagement, belonging. Or if you're interested in psychology, you will talk about positive social coherence. So sometimes in Finland, we try to do these both things at the same time. For example, our education system is fairly good, but what we fall behind compared to other European countries, such as Lithuania, Luxembourg, and other countries, is that we don't really have working school democracy in Finland. We are trying to, make that better. So usually when you talk about student councils, you say that it's a way to engage young people in decision making, and it will make the school community stronger. And in reality, Finnish young schools in average have 200 pupils, but they might have up to 1,300 pupils. And there's a board of student council that consists of 15 young people. It's not really an instrument for promoting social participation. That has to be done on the group level. But still to say that we have taken care of social participation because we did have a student council. So we are sort of mixing those two. And vice versa. Some of my youth work colleagues might try to make the youth council in their cities to be as fun as possible and make sure that young people feel safe and they enjoy working together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's effective political participation, but it's certainly effective social participation. So whenever I engage myself in development projects, I usually talk about these. And we know that for many young people who might not be interested about political participation, social participation is really, really important for them. So you could start at that and slowly try to, create conditions that they can actually participate in politics. Right, I will just skip these. And these, I just used this as a brief example. Now, many of you, obviously, since you're engaged in international youth work, you know how to get Erasmus money, and you know how Erasmus projects work, and you know how European Union thinks about youth policy. And one of the important tools of youth policy in Europe is EU Youth Dialogue, used to be called structured dialogue, and we are trying to recreate that. And usually we think in EU that's actually a good thing, and it helps young people to influence Europe. And the same study I showed you shows that actually Finland is here. So 3/4 of young people in Finland feel that they cannot influence what's going on in the European Union as a whole. Whereas for some reason, only 1/4 of Australians are Austrians, not Australians. Yeah, I'm doing it again. Are dissatisfied. So the number of young people who say that they can't either influence Europe at all or not very much is really, really high. So obviously the EU Youth Dialogue isn't a good enough tool to engage all the young people in Europe. And the share of those young people who say that they are able to contribute a great deal is relatively slow in countries such as Finland and Luxembourg. Whereas in Austria and Ireland and Spain and Germany, yeah, and Lithuania as well, yeah. So that's a bit higher. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was wondering about Malta, because you could, if you don't know Malta, and you know that it's a small country, so it might be easy to to engage young people, because the hierarchies are much smaller than in Germany, but still Malta is really it's on the bottom of the list for some reason. So any thoughts on that? Do we have you have the mic behind you? Yes.
So, and Professor Andrew Ajorbade,
Yeah.
and he did some research, and because people are less influenced with social participation, and then some educational and environmental, young people are more. So he did research, and one of the participants is telling, I do not wish to be associated with the activists on the political sphere, because they are mostly campaigning for their preferred party or just contrarians. Most of them have no desires for any major change. They just critique whatever action the opposing party takes. And some of them, because Malta has a lot of international communities, they are living there. And one of the participants tells, but I am struggling myself. I have suffered a lot in my life. I can't go back to my country because I feel persecuted there. I turned 28, so I'm swimming in debt. So he's telling that I have few friends trying to start my career in Malta, trying to work on my mental health, trying to find a way to settle in another country so that I can get another country's citizenship. So there are a lot of problems, and here there are very one negative consequences they are talking about. The increase in online hate speech, especially in Malta, sometimes makes me fear speaking my mind, especially on certain social media posts that I know for a fact tend to attract hate speech. What happens when people try to post in Facebook, Instagram, and they get bullied? And when they get bullied, so it affects their mind, and so they don't try to participate. This is the problem in Malta.
Yeah. We studied environmental activists in Finland, and to call it hate speech might be pushing down a problem, because it was severe form of mental violence. They were so heavily bullied. I mean, underage young people who took a strong stance for the environment, and mostly men. They're really heavily bullying them, and some of them stopped doing politics because the burden came too heavy for them. So that's one of the things we should perhaps talk more about, the amount of hate speech in general. And of course, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, young people couldn't get their voices heard because there are always gatekeepers. If you want to go to television, you have to convince a lot of people before you can go online. For us researchers, it's quite easy in Finland. Finland trusts researchers. So, but for young people, it's not possible. So social media gives them possibility to express themselves without gatekeepers. So it's really important. But it also changes the power relations. Actually, young people have a voice, and they take stance on different issues, like environmental issues. And that's a new situation for many, and that may explain partly why they are treated so badly. Yeah. I shouldn't be telling this story because I'm running out of time, but I will anyway. I was in Malta 4.5 years ago, in a British Commonwealth meeting, which was a bit bizarre for me because I thought that it was a thing of the past. And I met representatives from Solomon Islands and many other countries that I had heard of, but I didn't really have an opinion on them. And then they're visiting the old city of Malta. There some parts of Game of Thrones. I think the first season was filmed, and I was Game of Thrones. Well, this is wonderful. Yeah, and taking photos and talking to my youth researcher colleagues, which are a bit older than I am. And some of them said that, I don't really watch TV, so I don't. I know that Game of Thrones exists, but and that's not for me. So nobody actually was as enthusiastic as I was. So I just started taking photos on my own. And a Jamaican minister of youth affairs, he was a guy in his around 35, maybe 33, really young, really smartly dressed black dude who came to me. Then I was taking photos and asked what I was doing. And I said, Mr. Minister, I'm taking photos of a scene there, Game of Thrones happened. And he became really, really enthusiastic, saying that, wow, this is Game of Thrones. Are you serious, man? Yeah. So the first one that actually was, taken by the fact that Game of Thrones was shot there was a Jamaican Minister of Youth Affairs. So this is in no way connected to anything that I'm going to say. Yeah. So the things I wanted to show, I will show you two things, and then we'll call it quits. We'll have a break, and then we'll give Reetta the floor. Usually, when we are studying something, we are trying to understand how young people in Europe, how they are doing things. We ask two things, or in Finland, how they are doing things. Firstly, how do you participate yourself? And secondly, in your opinion, what is the most important form of participating? And now the green one here is the most important form of participating, and it's for many other countries, it's just voting. And some of those other things that young people might be really, really active in isn't so important. So, I'm getting really scary. So, So for Finns, voting is important, but these other forms of, making an impact are just about the same. Whereas for people living in France, 45% of them say that, voting is the most important thing. So even though, especially in the youth field, sometimes we think that it's, and it's true, voting is not the most important thing young people engage in. They do participate in a lot of ways as well. But funnily enough, in Finland, when they ask what's the most important form of participation, it's always voting. And it's the same thing in Europe as well. And there are other differences here. Now, this one is Lithuania, right? Yeah. So both of you, it's so for both of your countries, you and your neighboring country, it's participating in a youth organization. So probably, the reason you gave earlier, you said that, participating in a youth organization in your country is fun. So that explains what's going on here, probably. And for Cyprus, it's taking part in a dialogue. So I just wanted to show you that, then we are asking young people what's their opinion on how to make an impact. Usually, a lot of the young people think that these traditional forms are really important. But that's not the whole story. So you can actually see that, all of these alternatives, quite a big share of young people think that, these two are effective ways of influencing society. And we don't have time to look for different European realities, and to be honest, I lack the courage at the moment to do so. But still, what can be seen is that, this also shows that it's really important to work on these, different ways of participating and making that happen. And in Finland, we usually think that, I say we because I'm part of the youth work community in Finland. Research is an integral part of youth work community. And sometimes we say that the role of youth work is to do things that the others don't do at this moment. So if other people are concentrating on voting, it might not be the task for youth work to concentrate on voting. Let's try other things, boycotting, demonstrating, those sort of things maybe, or squatting. And then the rest of society catches up. It's time for youth work to move forward. So, but however you feel about youth work, this clearly shows that if so many young people, for example, there they are, in Finland feel that, these 6 or 7 forms of influence in society are important. So maybe it should be our role in a Finnish youth community and in a Finnish school community and in Finnish society in general to help them to be active and remove the barriers and so on. Right, I have a last point to make, which is this. I was studying how Finnish young people are able to make how Finnish young people are able to make an impact in schools, and I thought that 2 things are tremendously important. This was in a different schools. So firstly, when I looked at those young people who were able to make an impact, a lot of them they're really good at talking to adults. They had strong opinions. But then again, it can be asked, if you're trying to promote participation, shouldn't, being fluent and shouldn't having opinions be the end results, the end of a learning process, not the starting point? So I said to a lot of my colleagues working in participation that we should create more doormats, so more and more young people actually feel welcome, and it's safe and inclusive for them to start participating. And don't ask them to tell their opinions, make them feel safe. Make them feel accepted, have a proper doormat, and then things start happening. And another metaphor I used was glass ceiling. They actually rhyme in Finland, but they don't in English. So when young people started participating, for many of them, they became dissatisfied because they hit the glass ceiling. Glass ceiling, of course, derives from feminism, and they say, the classical feminism claim that women are excluded from society, not because they are directly forbidden of doing certain things, but at some points they hit the glass ceiling, they cannot move forward. And that's why it's so important that our Prime Minister is a young woman. She has broken a glass ceiling. And the head of youth affairs in Finland at the moment is the first woman ever in that position. Highly important as well because, the glass ceiling was broken in our community as well. But for many of the young people, adults tell to them that you can actually make an impact. Please tell your opinions, please inform us, and they improve our services. But in reality, a lot of them actually said that they, at some stage, they hurt their head because there is a glass ceiling. There is some level they cannot go up to. And it's not explicitly stated. So if you listen to Roger Hart, who wrote a wonderful report on participation, he said that giving right and accurate information is highly needed in participation, because if you don't do so, you end up lying to young people, and there's no dirtier trick, nor is there a more effective way of preventing young people to participate than actually lie to them how much you can make an impact. So if the ceiling is there, it cannot be a glass ceiling. It has to be explicitly stated that you can talk about, sofas in a school corridor, but you cannot talk about school rules. And if you don't do that, young people become dissatisfied and you're actually doing a disservice. Right, we're running out of time. Sorry for mixing Luxembourg and Lithuania. I will, think of something in the future so I can, maybe learn the flags also. And thank you for your attention. I will be here for the whole seminar, and I live with you on Friday, so we'll have a lot of time to chat about different things. Yeah, right, thanks.